Hello, this is Brave New History. We're here with Gnostic Quran,
Yeah.
and we'll be
Hi.
discussing. Oh,
Yeah.
hello,
Hello. Hi.
hello.
Yeah. Hi, everyone.
Yep. So thank you for joining us again. This is, I enjoy talking about Gnosticism and talking about Islam. So here we get to do both. So
Both.
it's a double joy here. Oh,
Double
and then
pleasure.
I should say there's nothing wrong with your computer screens. I'm missing a beard. So
Oh.
yeah, so hopefully I look kind of okay without it. I'm getting used to it myself, and I got a haircut as well.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Oh, look at that. I
Yeah. It
we
was all.
lost a viewer, so I shouldn't have pointed it out. I lost my beard. So um, he
It
just
was all.
was
It was
just
all
pretending.
green screen back at the day. Like.
Yeah, it was all a filter anyway. So yeah, the beard filter. So there's that. So today we'll be talking about, in addition to beards, we'll be talking about the fallen angel tradition,
Yeah.
which is something that I've found interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead.
It's presented in the Quran, and I would suggest that most of the Christian would be like, "What the hell is that?" Like, it's not so close to our understanding of the fall. But to be honest, this tradition was everywhere
Mhm.
in the Syriac writings, especially as far as I know, it's even in the Saint Ephraim, one of his homilies, where he discusses this stuff. And uh,
Oh, here,
he
sorry, my cat argument here. Okay, yeah, sorry.
and he is the Orthodox, right? He's not like this kind of weird Eastern Christian guy, because it's quite obvious from his poems, where he dedicated this kind of attack on Gnosticism, his refutation of heresies, as far as I know. Well, like what is the name of this homily? But where he would criticize basically every single Syriac Gnostic sect he can even reach. Dacianites, Manichaeans, Marcionites, and other. Uh, and he held the similar idea about the fall, that, fall happened because there was this kind of secret enmity between the Satan and the first man, Adam, even though it's not even clear in his writings what kind of Adam we're talking about here, the first Adam or the earthly, corporeal Adam one. And that's either not the case mm, with some Gnostic tradition, but
Mhm.
but in Islam it becomes like more polished towards the monotheism, where the second Adam was meant, because of the famous verse in the Quran where it states that, and there's like discussion between the God Allah, or you can say Allah, as it's pronounced in Aramaic, and this angelic being called Iblis, which most of the scholars will trace to the Greek word diabolos. But I myself very skeptical about this, because, well, it's not a problem to reconstruct it exactly like this in the Arabic, with a dal, with this kind of D sound at the beginning of the word. It would just be diablis in Arabic. Why dropping dal? And there was actually this Russian Muslim philosopher, Gidad Jamal, who proposed that maybe just from the Apollos, from this pagan deity, you would say, of sun deity of the Greeks. And even recently I found out that some Carpocratian Gnostics venerated Apollos, but this is coming from the Epiphanius, and well, Epiphanius is a guy you trust is the last guy to trust, basically, because well, he himself uh, says that it is honorable to lie for the sake of
Mm.
religion. So, but he actually reports that Carpocration held this kind of angelic worship uh, ideas, and one of the angels called uh, Apollos, but with a bat instead of the phi Greek, like it's the exactly same sounding or pronunciation as it in Arabic. So it would be Abolos, not Apollos. Maybe it's from there some inner Gnostic battles
Mhm.
crept in the Quranic corpus. But what I try to say that this kind of Adam fallen tradition in Quran, it's clear that Adam is the corporeal in a sense because he created from the clay, but you can always speculate what the authors of the Quran meant by this, what is called teen in Arabic, especially this kind of juxtaposition, I would say, because basically the name of this adversary, shaitan, is maybe two composite word in Arabic, shay, which is the thing, and tin, which is the clay, thing from the clay. But it, I myself like very cautious when I came up with this kind of let's borrow everything from Syriac idea,
Mhm.
which now circulating and popular among apologists. So, and there is like this kind of inner battle between the Iblis and the Adam, because Iblis says that, well, God, you brought me out of the flames, but him, Adam, you brought from the steam, from this clay, and I am like higher in this emanation process. I'm higher than him. I shouldn't worship the lower ones in that case. And because of that, he was expelled, and because Adam was the cause of the expulsion, he hates Adam. And here this kind of enmity occurs between the jinn and the insan, the like jinn, this kind of supernatural beings,
Mhm.
hidden ones, basically, if you translate it literally, and humanity. And I think you need to dedicate the whole chapter or whole video about this kind of jinn, because well, so
Yeah.
many speculation about what the hell is that, even though like the more rational party within Islam as Muslim modernists, uh, as they often labeled, and the Ahmadi or the Qadiani tradition, rather, because they came up from the Pakistan, with where this kind of guy declared himself to be a Mahdi, the the final Messiah, basically. Uh, they are like more tend to be more rational. There's no
Mhm.
rituals in Islam. Everything must be according to the natural laws. And they said actually that gene within the text of the Quran is just simply something unseen. It could be bacteria, which is very interesting. It could be some politicians because, well, from the common ear eye, politics is always like behind the veil, like real politics, and Quran speaks about that. That, well, you don't know what kind of plans they are trying to implement into the society. And this kind of idea in the Quran has always happened, that they plant and God plant, and the God is the best of the planners, but I would say this verse is just a polished Sunni version, because original word makir is definitely not to plan but to deceive. It was used in this context. Yeah, but I digressed. This tradition is rooted and embedded in some Syriac texts, and for example, Cave of the Treasure, one of the texts, which often bears similarities with the Quran. For example, in this text, you can also see this kind of Alexandrian tradition, where Alexander are presented as some sort of apocalyptic figure who would be responsible to the rise of Juj and Majuj, what is called in the Quran, or Gog and Magog. It's kind of, I don't know how it even describes, some satanic animalistic creatures who would just tear apart the world, basically. But and that this is the parallels with this Syriac books, a Syriac book called Cave of Treasure. And another parallel, of course, this fallen angel tradition, which is found there too, almost exactly in the same, like with the same ideas circling around, that there is the enmity between the Satan and the Adam. And in this text, as far as I know, it's the similar story, basically, that Satan is very angry about the angel Michael, who trying to convince him to basically bow down towards the Adam, and he refuses to bow down towards him because he is from clay. Of course, later on, the Muslim tradition would say that, well, it is because he was blind, this kind of satanic figure, which is called Iblis. He couldn't see the inner spirit within Adam. He only could perceive this outer body of the Adam, that he's just some sort of a puppet. He doesn't have a soul, basically. But what was interesting in my research, that this tradition is very old, and well, maybe it's not in the same rendition of the story, but for example, there are some apocryphal Syriac Gnostic tradition, but the name is different in there for this adversary or the accuser figure. The name is Sadael, and the fall of the angel has to do with basically Sadael desire for his throne to be glorified, not the throne of this god above. You can see it as almost as Sophia in Valentinian tradition, who has she has its own throne. And this particular rendition is very reminiscent of the Yaldabaoth story in some Gnostic texts within the corpus of Nag Hammadi library. Interestingly, that the lust for power led to disaster, and definitely in this story, there's no enmity between the Satan and the man, rather the enmity between the Satan and the God above. And Satan was cast down before the creation of Adam in this particular story. However, this is not true for the other traditions. And I will just read the short version from this Syriac Apocryphon, which unfortunately you can only find it in the German, but this is my rough translation. Once the Lord God had created the heavens and the earth, impure Satan didn't want God to be praised, and he puffed up his heart and wanted to exalt his throne like the throne of God. And the Lord God sent the seraphim armed with a hammer, the great Gabriel and the terrible Michael, and the 9 hosts of the angels. They turned against the Sadiel and all of his servants and defeated them, and they came down like a hail from the clouds. And this is from this apocryphal. God damn this dog. For example, in the Jewish apocryphal text, Apocalypse of Moses, or how's it called in Latin, Vitae Adam, the fall was due to the refusal to worship the Adam after he was a created one. And as far as I know, the text doesn't make it clear which Adam we are talking about. Like there's general creation story, but well, this general creation story also occurs in Gnostic or like Manichaean tradition with this kind of celestial Adam of, or Adam Kadmon, as it's famous in Kabbalistic tradition. And here, the angel Michael asks this satanic figure to worship the image of the Jehovah in that case, and he refuses. First, he just shocked and tried to like he answer with a question like, well, why are you trying to compel me to worship the lower creature instead of the God? And well, I think the argument that the whole idea that Adam was created in the image of God is very important, because, well, otherwise there's no point to worship the creature. It would be basically idolatry. But here, the Adam himself represents this higher divinity in the lower spheres. The idea quite reminiscent in the Gnostic schools, where the God sends like this good dude to redeem the souls of the trapped, which trapped in the darkness, and this, what Manichaeans called him, like Jesus the Luminous, or the Aeon of Christ, descends into the Hades, basically. And well, you can, like, as far as I know, this is just a standard narrative within the Eastern Orthodox Church. The whole redemption story circling about this fact that Jesus redeemed the souls of the sinners in hell, and which is quite, I would say, monophysite in this flavor. You would imagine some sort of a redemption of all souls in this kind of portrayal of Christology, where all souls would be redeemed, and this is called the apokatastasis, which was like this kind of the chief idea within the Alexandrian theological school, and Clement of Alexandria, Origen, they believed in this stuff. And well, from my perspective, it makes much more sense when you held this kind of ontology within this specific Christology. But well, Orthodoxy, exactly like Manichaeans and Zoroastrianists, believe in the eternality of the hell and the paradise. And well, how they try to explain this fact, that's for them. But yeah, let's continue with this particular tradition. And similar story appears, for example, in the Mandean sacred scripture Ginza. And let's find my script for a second. And this is from the German version of Ginza, because I couldn't find any like good one in English, and this one from one of the manuscripts they had in Iraq, and the name of the translation is from Mark Lidzbarski, for the ones who would wonder. And the High King of Light said some of the angels of fire should be at the service of Adam. They shall came and bow down before him, and do not deviate from his speech. Only he alone, the evil one, from whom evil was formed, deviated from the word of his Lord, and didn't follow the word of his Lord. When he didn't follow the word of his Lord, he was bound in his chariot with the fetters of God. And this kind of repetition, when he didn't follow the word of his Lord, is quite common phenomena with a Ginza, where this kind of repetitive phrase occurs because it's some sort of wordplay in the Mandean to give credence for the like liturgical rhythm, basically. And well, Mandeans are very not alike, I would say, the Orthodox understanding, but the whole idea is probably the same, that there's this kind of enmity between the higher divinity and the lower one because in that case the impure one or evil one deviated from the speech, and in that case the speech would be the Adam, this kind of nous, which later on ended up being in this Gnostic or Hermetic tradition too, where the Adam would be identified with a speech of God. And in terms of the Quran itself, it's very interesting that the Quran repeatedly states that Adam is similar in creation, but it's always problematic for me to translate Arabic khalaqa to create. It's rather emanate, or I don't know, to split something from bigger part of the. He is like similar to this emanation of Jesus, and this is quite an, I would say, orthodox understanding, because Orthodox Christian, they believe that the whole story of Adam is all about the Jesus, and the Adam itself represents this kind of this Jesus, even though it has very Gnostic flavor to it, because how you can reconciliate the fact of this corporeal Jesus in that case? Well, because clearly what we're talking about, not the Jesus who walked in the Galilee, we're talking about this kind of aeon. And how they do that, well, there's a specific Trinitarian dogma, but it's what I wanted to say. It's very fitting. This argument's very fitting, maybe in Valentinian tradition, where the Jesus is just one of the redeemer figure, but or Nestorianism, for example. But what I wanted to say, that this equation of speech of God with the first, basically, I won't say the first creation, but with the creation of this divine anthropos, with divine man, is also present in the Mandean book. And I think there will be a whole series about Mandeans in my channel, because goddamn, I try to investigate this Ginza. So many parallels with Quran, especially. You can see that as borrowing from Islam. Many credible scholars who are like Mandean scholars, they date this book way before Islam emerged, like 4th century. Maybe some stuff crept in within the corpus itself, But yeah, like the idea of the names of God, they very similar. Appears like Hakim, Aziz, maybe because of the geography, because, well, in Syria and like in inscription in Syria and Iraq, you can find out this pagan deities appears to have exactly same names as it attributed to the higher god in the Quranic text, like Azizos or Hakim. But what else? What else? For example, Allah or Elaha is also appears in the Mandean book, and as far as I know, it's not very negative. I mean, it appears as a deity, but as some sort of alien deity, akin the Marcion understanding of the alien god. But as far as I know, Mandeans, they like they do not see the like this kind of idea of the mono. I'm not trying to make an argument with the Mandeans, but as far as I know, they would just acknowledge other or deities in other tradition as some sort of a daimon or the divinities within specific cultural boundaries, and even Allah for them would be just one of the many gods in that case. Yeah, let's continue with this kind of tradition. We discussed the mundane appearance, and for example, the hypostasis of the archons. This text you can find in the Nag Hammadi library, and there's the passage like that. And Zoe, which almost identified with this kind of higher Sophia, which like the part of the Ogdoad, and this is the life basically, if it to translate it literally into English from Greek, and life itself was a part of the Ogdoad and Valentinian tradition. The daughter of the Pistis Sophia cried out and said to him, "You are mistaken, Sakla." And Sakla just means the foolish one, for which the alternative name is Yaldabaoth. She breathed into his face, and her breath became a fiery angel for her. And that angel bound Yaldabaoth and cast him down into the Tartaros, below the abyss. And it's not exactly the same, but we can see that in that case, the higher divinity here, the Zoe, is one of the emanation within, like one of the aeons, within the Ogdoad, which with her breath create this angelic fiery being. And well, in Orthodox tradition, you see this names of angel of the Gabriel or Michael in that case, but here the name is not presented for this particular fiery angel. And this angel, he basically the same story. He casting down this demiurgic figure into the abyss, and just one of the rendition of all of the angel stories. And definitely, you need to perceive this Nag Hammadi library as it is, as a library. That's not that's not unintentional to call it the library, because it contains within it like different Gnostic schools. Definitely, this type of view wouldn't be like compliant, I would say, with a different tradition within the corpus. And I myself inclined to see the my Quranic text like that, but that's too controversial, I would say. Another similar narrative you can find in the Ethiopic book of Enoch, which unfortunately is not part of the Orthodox curriculum. It's not the part of the canon within the Orthodoxy, but it is the part for the as far as I know, Orthodox Ethiopic Church and what is called the Tevachedo Church, which is quite similar in pronunciation as Tawhid in Arabic. And in Ethiopic, it means something completely different than what the Muslim apologists would try to sell to you as some sort of they wouldn't dare to call it monotheism, they would just say it unity of God, like it's kind of castrated monotheism, basically. But in the Ethiopic or other Semitic languages, it means basically the unification. And in a sense, the unity would be the right term, like if we do translate this, but it's composite unity, or what is more important. And for example, like in Arabic, if you want to gather some people, you just call itahadu, which would just, like in the language of today, it would be used in that sense. So quite strange that that in the Quran it must mean some, like, I don't know, almost themistic divine simplicity idea. But in this particular tradition, within the book of Enoch, I don't know, Enoch, or how is it correctly, because in Arabic it's just Yunus. No, the name of the angel is different. It's Azazil, and I would just read up straight away. Bind the Azazel bind his hand and foot, and cast him into the darkness, and make an opening in the desert, which is in Dudael. Nobody knows what the hell is, and cast him therein, and place upon him rough and jagged rocks, and cover him with the darkness, and let him abide there forever, and cover his face that he may not see the light. And presumably this Dudael is just another name for this lower plane of existence, right? Like the Tartaros in the Greek. And what's interesting, well, why I bring this stuff up, because there is actually esoteric Shia traditions where something similar portrayed. For example, there is like this kind of Alawi Nusayri book called the Ummul Kitab, and this is basically borrowed from this title, borrowed from the text of the Quran itself, because it roughly translates as this kind of mother of the scripture. In that case, in the Muslim exegetical tradition, they would identify it with the Surah Al-Fatiha, and it's quite interesting that Sunni tradition would bear this, I don't know, almost Pythagorean sense of this concept, because Al-Fatiha consists of several small words, but they would just say that within the Fatiha, the whole Quran is contained, like it just basically transcription from this like, I don't know, Akashic record or something like that. And but within this Kitab, this book of what today is called Alawi or Nusayri, but back at the day they were called the Ghulati Shia or Ghuluf Shia or Ghaliyun, which translates as radicals or the extremists, because they were basically saying that Ali is God, even though it's highly, I'm very questionable about that fact, what they meant about this Ali, whether it's just, what do you wanted to say?
Oh yeah, so I talked to an Alawite, and he was kind of the opinion he wouldn't go so far as to say, well, now they become mainstream, so they adopted mainstream views. But before, it's kind of like Christ. Well, where like if you've seen me, you've seen Allah, and so like Allah or what Ali is like the gate or something like that to Allah, and
Oh,
we're
I would
basically
say in
like
in the in the most of the Nusayri tradition,
yeah,
well, maybe he belongs to the different one because it's not like the monolith. When we say Alawi tradition, we don't say like it's just
sure,
one tradition. There's so many of them, for God's sake, because they don't have. I mean, they have the scripture, but they held it in the past during the reign of the Fatimid Caliphate, which was an Ismaili Caliphate, and but for the rest of the history, they would remain mostly oral, their tradition. And well, if you have an oral type of transmission, inevitably you will end up being uh, like the branching of the tradition would occur. And I'm sorry to interrupting you, but what I wanted to say that as far as I know, in most of the tradition, Ali would be identical with Allah, with a mana, what is called, with a higher deity, which is interesting because in Mandean tradition or Mandean scripture, the higher god is called exactly like that, mana. So continue what I wanted to say.
oh yeah, well he was kind of saying you could see how it's interpreted that way, but it was never really so simple. But so it's kind of like to do Hajj is to draw close to Ali,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's kind of like uh, what the Kaaba is. That's
Mm.
Ali, right? So you're to draw near to Ali is to draw near to God, but
Yeah, yeah, I
it's
see that because I think in most of the Nusayris they do not pray towards the Kaaba. It may be some shock for. Well, that's exactly
yeah.
why there's
Well,
like this kind of
they do,
prayer.
but that's the thing. The Kaaba isn't the cube;
Yeah,
it's
that
Ali.
they do it because well,
Yeah,
just established like common belief within,
yeah.
or excuse me, within
Or
them.
or yeah,
Within,
now they do, but before they didn't.
I think that
Yeah.
exactly like that because they do it only to what is called the taqiyya, to hide their belief, so they wouldn't be like so they wouldn't be noticed by the Sunni authorities basically and persecuted because well you need to pay the taxes.
Mhm.
So specific tax. Yeah. Well, if you do translate the Ali literally, it just means the high one, and well, even if you see this, what is called the Shia Shahada, or Shia
Mhm.
testimony of faith, they would add the Aliyun Waliyullah to the Muhammad Rasulullah.
Mhm.
Well, this Aliyun is basically the same spelling as the Hebrew Elyon, which is this El Elyon, the higher God. But well, maybe it's just my parallelomania goes on. But if you see if to see it literally, because in my perspective, in this scheme, Muhammad would be like Jesus. Muhammad would be the intermediary figure. Uh, but yeah, it's a big question
Yeah.
because even within the Shahada, you came up with the idea that just Muslims are the demiurge worshippers. They just simply reiterate the boast of Yaldabaoth, that there is no God besides him. And they
Mhm.
would be, no, there is no gods besides the Yaldabaoth, basically. But, well, there was a different type of debates within the early school. And that's sad because most Muslims, they do not perceive the Alawis as the parts of the Islam is just and I myself heard this argument not from Muslims. This kind of propaganda already spoiled the minds. So, for example, in Russian discourse, I heard exactly the same thing. Oh, well, they're just different religion. They held absolutely different belief. Well, you need to prove whether the Sunni tradition have some counterparts within the early Quranic corpus, or just basically made up long after within the opposite reign. And as far as I know, there's like a big work going on right now with the corpus of the Shia radicals, Gholiyun or Ghaliyun tradition, because they find out very interesting stuff that the manuscripts, for example, is almost identical what they find out, for example, what is called the book of the shadows, Kitab Haftul Azila or Al-Azila. The manuscript of these books, they found out one in Yemen, one in India, one in Mesopotamia, and they almost identical, which gives us the hint that maybe back in the day there were like widespread tradition of this specific understanding of Islam, which deemed not to be so Islamic by the Sunni brethren, and it may predate the what is called this classical Ismaili understanding, which would be akin Valentinian tradition, but in that case it would be more inclined towards this Zoroastrian dualism or Manichaeanism. And who is like today there's not a much of a speakers for Ismailis, except for maybe Khalil Andani, who I don't know about his belief, because well, you need to discuss it personally. I won't dare to tell what he believes, but as far as I know, he like believes in this kind of common Ismailism, and he had a recent debate with a what is his name, with a Muslim metaphysician, right? Like this, and he's the Salafi, and what is interestingly, he ex-Quraniyun. He was the Quran only follower for a long time, as far as I know, like for 8 or 10 years he was like Quran only, and recently converted to the Salafi Islam or the Athari Islam, and they held the debate, and goddamn, Khalil Andani just destroyed him. He was super prepared. So I would glad to see that in the future, that more Ismailis will come up to combat to combat the so-called the Athari tradition and to try to claim the orthodoxy for themselves. We were discussing this idea which is presented in the Kitab, that this Azazil name appears in there, and the Azazil plays almost the same role in the stuff as the Iblis. It's quite strange. Why would they use Azazil instead of Iblis, the authors of the book? Well, you can say, well, it's not based on the Quran, but there's the whole lot of quotation from the Quranic text in this particular tradition. But I just try to find out this, but it's very hard. That's one of the passages. The High King lent Azazil light, and using this light he shaped his creation. In his image he made spirits. The king shouted about what he had done, and Azazil shouted his creation of place, eon, and spirit into being. And no one but the High King knows how many. The High King said to Azazil, "Old man," and this is very important, this old man, which appears in this particular particular text. And in Arabic, it's because I read in the English, but it would be just shuyukh, the old man, or sheikh. This old man often appears in the Manichaean manuscripts within the corpus of Turfan text, which were found in what is nowadays, what is that, Turkmenistan or Uzbekistan? I don't quite, oh no, it's China. Yeah, it's China. What am I talking about? There's the whole Turpan province in China. But the old man, the idea that the demiurge, this demiurgos figure, is the old man, or portrayed like old. I would say that modern people who are into Gnosticism, they would perceive the demiurge exactly like that. But this idea was presented, what I wanted to say, in Manichaean tradition, in Apocalypse of Paul, where the Coptic version, of course, which found in Nag Hammadi library, because there's other tradition where the details of the hell is more described in the physical way. But in the Coptic version, the old man appears too, as the same kind of chief archon, even though it not quite portrayed as some evil figure, but he basically are the one who preventing the spirit to bypass this gate to the Ogdad, which would be basically the heaven. And and I will continue to read. The High King said to Azazel, "Old man, tell me who you are and what I am, and what all these creatures are." And Azazel answered, "You are God, and I am a God, and all the spirits both of us have made." Like we were both responsible for the creation, basically. And the High King said, "There cannot be two gods. You are my creation. I am the one who's made the spirits in fulfillment of the God's word. I will create a person out of the clay." And this is as far as I know, just the quotation from the Quran. Yes, it's from the Surah 38. And Azazel said, "What I've made is more than yours. Yes, I've made 10 times more than you. How can you dare claim your divinity?" And later text will just be the idea that this High King creates something absolutely unimaginable and show it to the Azazel and ask him, "Well, if you're such a high god, create the exactly same one." And he couldn't. He shocked of just pure vision of this majesty which this High King created. And he admits that he is the lower one. So it would be in line with the idea of some modern Taibi Ismaili tradition, this non-orthodox form of Ismailism, because, well, the major branch is Nizari, and this kind of branch which resides in the India, called the Taibi, and they believe that, well, there is some sort of a redemption scheme for this demiurge, for the Azazel, that he wouldn't be basically cast into the hellfire in the future, when the day of judgment will occur. That's what I wanted to quote from this particular book. We can see this. I mean, it's not a similar tradition, but just see that the naming of this, of, I don't know, accuser, adversary figure, demiurge, whatever I like to name him, is used the same in the book of Enoch and Kitab. Also, there's interesting tradition which you can find in the Questions of Bartholomew, or the Gospel of Bartholomew, which by many scholars accepted to be Gnostic. And in this particular tradition, the name of the demiurgic figure is a Beliar, another different name. And this is from there's whole debate. What is the dating? Some date it to the 2nd, some date it to the 5th century. Most of the scholars believe it was written in Egypt, and this Bellier tells the Bartholomew, because it's basically it's kind of what will be the part of this visionary tradition, where Bartholomew ascend to the throne room and would be talking to the different angels, and in that case, one of the angels would be this Beliar. And the Beliar tells the Bartholomew that the reason he fell from the grace was because he refused to worship a man, basically. And I'm just quoting, "And when I came from the ends of the earth, Michael said, worship thou the image of the God, which he hath made according to his likeness. But I said, I am the fire of the fire. I was the first angel formed. And shall I worship the clay and matter?" And I suppose the earth is used, not the matter, like Hele in Greek, which would be identical in Coptic, because the gospel was written in Coptic. That's another tradition, but interestingly enough, that the name again is different. I don't know why, why names are so drastically changes throughout the whole discourse. Maybe just maybe, it's my speculation, but they would try to ascribe some local divinities. I don't know who was still venerated in the local areas to this demiurgic figures, but this is just my speculation. Yeah, and same narrative can be found in Hermetic tradition, but we know that Hermeticists, for example, they weren't dualist. They were more akin to Valentinians. They would see Demiurge as the positive figure rather than the negative one. And here the mind, who is God, being the androgyne and existing as a life and light, by speaking gave birth to a second mind, basically the nous in the translation, a demiurgos, who, as the god of fire and spirit, crafted the 7 governors. They encompass the sensible world in circles, and the government is called fate. Like the first thing you would think about is the Apocryphon of John, where the 7 archons were governed by the fate, basically. And the fate is almost identical with the Zoroastrian Zurvanism, where the chief god would be Zervan, which roughly translated as the doom or fate or the higher time. Quite similar to the Hindu tradition of the Mahakala, the great time. Yeah, but overall in the text, the demiurge seen as the brother of this Adam, of this first man, or anthropos, which is used in this particular text, of the higher deity, higher father. And in this particular text, the father creates the Adam out of the most of like narcissistic love to like venerate himself, like create him. It's like the guy standing in front of the mirror, basically. Yeah, but overall, I want to say that in Hermeticism, the demiurge is not seen as a bad guy. And I'm trying to find anything more, but I don't find it. Like I just pull up whatever I could find in the similar tradition, and well,
Yeah.
that's the end of my presentation, I guess. Then.
Yeah, very good. So one question is, in Islam, we have Dajjal, Iblis, Shaitan.
Yeah.
Are they all different characters, or are they the same?
Well, within the text of the Quran, there is no Dajjal, first and foremost. Dajjal is the concept of the Hadith tradition. And this is basically Masih ad-Dajjal. It's not just the Dajjal, it's the Antichrist Messiah. You can say it Messiah ben David, but it's whether they would perceive it like that.
Mhm.
Because, well, even in the texts of the Tanakh, the Davidic Messiah portrayed as like this fiery, almost demonic-like figure who would just slaughter everyone except for the chosen ones. And maybe they would perceive it, but I myself see that this concept of Dajjal being more close to what's called Myo Fudo in the Vajrayana form of this kind of Japanese Buddhism, where this fiery Buddha appears in the portrayal very similar as a Dajjal in the Hadith tradition. And you may argue that Buddhism was widespread even in 8th century. I don't remember exactly the same article. I myself will try to translate and post on my personal website because, well, unfortunately, it's presented in German and it's from this German high critical scholarship about the origins of Islam in Nara school, and they actually argue that there's a lot of parallels within the Islam and Buddhism in this particular arguments. It's the Volker Pop article, as far as I know, and Volker Pop would be very similar to me. Well, I'm just the Mukhalid of Volker Pop, the blind follower, in terms of his idea that Islam originated in Mesopotamia rather than in Hijaz or Petra or Jordan. But he traces Islam back to the Khorasan, back to the eastern parts of Iran in Marv, what is modern-day Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan. And yeah, you can argue that maybe there was like influence of Buddhism on this Dajjal tradition because, well, it's not in the Quran. And in the Quran, it's not quite clear about this Shaitan and Iblis, whether it's the same person. Shaitan is just the evil one, is mostly translated. It could be just akin the Buddhist Mara, like the bad inclination, whilst Iblis is definitely this, I mean, some figure, whether like physical or metaphysical, which have the personality. It's not simply the state of mind or something. Yeah, and I don't know what to add to the answer more.
Yeah. And, maybe we can go into,
Questions.
yeah, comments and questions here. So we have a whole bunch we'll see from Jason, also known as Sobek, Lord of the Four Corners. So thank you so much for staying up, or I don't know what time it is where you're at.
I can't stay up. It depends on you whether you're busy or not. I'm just free.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, like if Jason, if he's staying up, because I guess I assume he's from the U.S., but maybe not. Let's see. We can't trust. I'll just put this up here.
You can trust Epiphanius. Sorry, just disappeared.
Oh, there we go. Now we got it. Further than you can throw them.
Yeah, I agree. And Epiphanius is the one who talking about diatessaron. That's why I'm highly critical. This whole name of diatessaron came up from Epiphanius.
Yep, it's not going through the four of anything, just the one. And let's see. And Philo also considered the logos as synonymous with nous or mind. Yeah. And along those lines with Platonism, and I'll just do a little bit of parallelomania here.
It's always
with the death of Socrates.
Oh,
He says like as he drinks the hemlock.
poison.
Yeah, and then later he says, "Oh, and sacrifice a rooster for me to what god was it? To Asclepius."
Oh, Asclepius.
And so that like with roosters crowing and whatnot, that means like rising back up, and
Oh,
Asclepius could bring you back to life.
oh,
And he's talking about like I forget what the term is, but he was using the word logos a lot, like
oh.
resurrecting the logos. And so he says wherever there's Socratic dialogue or discussion or like
Yeah, you may wonder.
argumentation.
Yeah, I know what you're talking. You may wonder what is first, like just Greek Platonism or Christianity, in that sense. But well, Christianity as a phenomenon, as the white tradition. I wouldn't say that like all of the Christians follow the Platonic scheme, for example. It just what is called the orthodoxy would follow that's Trinitarianism, which is like just rehashed Valentinianism, basically. Or,
Mm,
or for example, even the term which used in the Nicaea Creed, homoousios, it also appeared in this kind of Hermetic tradition I quoted about the demiurge. But firstly, it was used by Basilides, and homoousios basically meaning the same substance from Greek. And you always wonder why the Nicene Creed, borrowing the language of the of the founder of the Basilidian Gnostic sect. But yeah,
that is an interesting idea. I've not heard that.
even
Like made of the same substance, right? Isn't that what it
yeah,
is?
yeah, that the
Yeah.
Son basically bears the same substance as the Father, and in that case, it would be this nous or logos.
Yeah.
And even in Nicaea, as far as I know, there is no incarnation Christology yet. There is just this kind of more or less Gnostic scheme without the ascribing divinity to this kind of corporeal Jesus, the Jesus from the Galilee. Uh, it would came up later on within the debate with Orthodoxy versus Nestorians. But yeah,
Yeah. And that's kind of going into the whole Richard Carrier thing, right? Um, yeah, which is a little bit controversial these days with that. But yeah.
yeah.
All right. And we have yes, because Zoe is the name of Eve in the first two chapters of the Greek version of the Old Testament.
Oh, that's
I
interesting. I
is
first
it?
time hear that.
Me too. That's very interesting. I've not heard that. Um, and the
It's
whole idea, it's
mhm.
interesting with the whole idea of Sophia or Zoe
Yeah.
within, it's a different, I forget which Gnostic school it is, but where we see the parallels between the Eden narrative in Genesis
Uh-huh.
and
And
in the Pleroma. So we have Sophia. She creates
yeah, the
Yaldabaoth. And
abhors
what's that?
abhors Yaldabaoth.
Yeah, or whatever verb you want to put in
Yeah.
there. And then he goes off and he's hiding or is hidden. He's not hiding, but there's a veil that he can't see. And
Mhm.
then she says, "Where are you?" Right? Just like the Lord in the garden says to Adam and Eve, "Where are you?"
Yeah.
And just like, well, and then there's some similarity with Mary,
Yeah, Mary
in the
and
gospel.
Jesus. Yeah.
Yeah, that, and then they even say the verb overshadows. where there's like the reflection of Sophia on the waters, and Yaldabaoth traps that and uses
Yeah,
that to create the souls or the bodies
yeah,
of the
exactly.
people. And just like Yaldabaoth um, being
As
created by, because
by
she
the heart.
creates him on his own, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But there's no
Without the
hair.
counterpart.
Yeah, just like Mary in the Gospels
Yeah,
is
yeah,
overshadowed by the Spirit.
exactly. And
But,
yeah, you will go full Parallelmanian because, well, that's why these debates of Virgin Mary is very heated between the Jews and the Christians. And well, I always a pleasure to listen to Tavai Singer argument when he uses that. But yeah, you can trace in some Valentinians in the several Gnostic schools. But about this Mariology, there's a interesting book, as far as I know. It's called Which Mary, and there's different versions of Mary within not only Christianity but other traditions. And for example, if we're like talking about the Quran, but in the Quran, Mary is not at least the same Mary of the Orthodox Church, because in Quran Mary is the sister of the Moses, Miriam, and she is the one who actually the mother of the Isa, whoever it may be. What is this Isa is
mhm,
in the minds of the authors of the Quran. And in the Mandean scripture, for example, Harawan Gawaita is like the secondary scripture in the Mandean corpus. There's interesting story about the Mirai, but it's not the Mary. It's a different name. But the critique which Mandeans drive towards the Christianity that this Masih, they never named him, that Jesus, basically. They just simply state Masih in their texts, which is just the roughly translated as Christ. But which Christ? Maybe there was different Masih claimants in the period of where all this Christian drama appeared. And when they declared that he was a false prophet, he like subverted the nations, perversed them. This Miriam was his mother, and in that particular tradition, in Harawan Hawaita, she is the daughter of the Moses, not the sister. So I don't know. Maybe maybe there are some interesting
mhm.
ideas of Richard Kerr are basically true, because, well, which Mary, for God's sake, and what to trust, you don't even know, because even Quran is not clear. Maybe there was like different biographies compiled out of this basic Platonic myth, as you said. Like they would just pick up that and create biography, and well, there would be different biographies because there was always gonna be a competition within the religion. So
Mhm.
who knows?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Which, yeah, I mean, that's a good point with mythicism. If it's all based on Platonism, like even just kind of connecting the dots, like, when I read of Socrates' death, that seems pretty, you could
Yeah,
see the parallels there with,
yeah, even the idea of the 12 apostles, which would be corresponding to the to the 12 months of the year, uh, which would be like the very popular number within the mystic
Mhm,
schools. And in some Gnostic tradition, Mary like the opposes the 12, right? That she's like the only one with a brain, basically. And maybe there's like this kind of idea that in that case it would be Sophia against its 12 archons. But who knows? Well, what would they try to come up with? But well, I myself is not like hardcore mythicist, but I would not just simply disregard it as being like some dubious and unfounded idea.
Yeah. Yeah, I've tried to put it together with like what's going on with Christianity in terms of the zodiac. It's difficult, but I mean, it would make so much sense that it's there, but I can't seem to piece it together.
But I just don't like this kind of Christian attitude where they just say, "Oh, it's like you're trying to." It's almost they saying that we're basically comparing Quetzalcoatl myths with a with the Christianity. But we are talking about tradition which were there at the time,
Mhm.
not talking about some, I don't know, Mayan mythology. Of course, you came up with some parallels within the Mayan tradition, undoubtedly. I think
Well, yeah, but
that's
I mean, if they're, I mean, yeah, I mean, sure, I don't see them, but if they're striking parallels,
yeah.
right, between, Mayan myth and Christianity, you have to look at that a little bit more than say, oh, well, psh, you know, but,
Yeah, exactly. They would
but,
just disregard, unfortunately.
yeah, I mean, it
Yeah,
just looks so much like something zodiac, right? We have Peter the fish.
yeah.
There's a connection with a rock. I don't get any kind of connection with rock and fish in the zodiac, but um,
Yeah, the
I
whole
don't
like
know.
that
What about the other apostles? I don't know. Like,
Y12, like it definitely
yeah,
wasn't this number. Like there were
and
much
the
more.
numbers or the names for the apostles vary depending on which gospel you read. And I might be off, but even between Luke and Acts, I think they're a little bit off in some details. But which is another reason, but the discontinue just as a random tangent, the discontinuity between Luke and Acts might lead us to believe like there was this, I forget her
Yeah.
name, but somebody said that they probably actually don't have the same author. It's just made to look like they do,
Mhm.
Luke and Acts, but there are some issues with it
Mhm.
that maybe they're not, but who knows?
But most of the current scholarship they just perceive it as the soul work, as far as I know, Lukács and anti-Marcion,
Yeah.
where the Pole became the basically Jewish rabbi.
Yeah, and I've also heard it was Dr. Price, and I think we also talked about this before with Paul as the Paraclete. Did we mention that before? That you said Stephen Huller was of that opinion?
Oh yeah, exactly.
I think that's an interesting idea because I believe I came up with that independently. The idea of what if Paul was the Paraclete?
Yeah,
Maybe I just heard that from Dr. Price, or
yeah.
uh,
Stephen Hiller is a gem. Basically, his article is called "160 Reasons to Believe That Marcion Gospel Were Using Diatessauronic Material." I would recommend to everyone who like interested in the New Testament studies to read that article. It's lengthy one, but it's worth it. And from him, I studied that, for example, the Mani name, the famous Parthian prophet. Uh, it could be the short, like the short version of Menachem, of the Hebrew name, and this Menachem, in some Jewish tradition, rabbinical tradition, is just the name for the future Messiah. So but by them, in Manichaeans, were trying uh, to say that the Mani himself was this Menachem, this last prophet, maybe in the some connection to this paraclete idea, but this paracletomania, I think it was present back in the day, that there would be different claimants. And yeah, when you mentioned Robert Price, he, as far as I know, held this idea that maybe the Paul himself was just like another claimant for the divinity, just like the Jesus was. And even in rabbinical literature, we will find out that during the life of the Jesus, there was different rabbis who would declare themselves to be messiahs. So who knows? Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
But Stephen Hiller even said that, well, Muhammad himself could be this kind of Marcionitic Messiah, which is like, what the hell? Mind blowing. Like,
Yeah. And we have Jason again. I love the Nag Hammadi. My first podcast in a couple of weeks is going to be covering the Nag Hammadi. Yeah. I'll have to subscribe if I haven't already.
yeah.
Let's see. All right, here's question one. So we're into the questions. All right. Do you think the Testament of Solomon had any influence on the Islamic jinn tradition?
I would
That's
think that the jinn tradition itself is just overall or present within this kind of Mesopotamian background, because we find the Syriac inscriptions where this kind of word appears, jinnati, and as far as I know, even Christian used some Syriac speaking Christian used this word to describe the basically daimons, the pagan deities. But I haven't studied in detail this question, because as far as I know, there's like the big parallelomania with the Book of Giants, this kind of Titanomachy tradition, and where the Titans would be basically identical with the genes. But I can answer that with a certainty, but I myself is not. I mean, in the Quran, the Solomon, or this kind of Solomon's, who's at least the people who lived back at the time, they were instructed by the two angelic beings called the Harut and Marut, which is almost identical with the Zoroastrian angels Haru Mawat, or the second one. I don't remember, but they would represent something, some sort of immortality or stuff. They would teach the secrets. It's almost like the I don't remember the name of the angels, but the one who like taught the Tubal Cain to like the all of this kind of blacksmithing stuff. It's I don't know. Maybe there's some parallel to that, but maybe I need to study it more in detail. This Testament of Solomon.
And then here, I think we kind of answered that a bit.
Yeah.
100%. Like, what, identical? Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty much the same. It's and they are like created out of the fire. This idea that there's just it's mostly Zoroastrian that like well, this is just the emanation. It's not the true God.
Let's see. And then we've got in the hypostasis of the archons,
Pistis
Sophia is mother of Zoe and Eve.
Yeah, but it's the Pistis Sophia. It's not just simply Sophia, because Pistis, as far as I know, was like the higher compared to the life in the like 30 aeons of the Valentinianism, but because there is like lower Sophia, and then there is like not corporeal, but the Sophia Hamut, which is also identical with this father mother deity, which in my perspective is Rahman Rahim in the Quran, but that's maybe for some late discussion.
All right. And Ria Sun, that's a name I don't remember seeing here before, so thank you so much for your question. And have you ever looked into root words in the Quran?
Yeah,
Is
this
is
is
that to
basically,
say?
yeah,
Oh
this
yeah,
is
go ahead.
basically what am I doing like 80% of the time, because I'm currently like trying to create the dictionary of the Quranic Arabic with a Strong's number concordance, and Strong's numbers is just the biblical dictionary when you can find this kind of Hebrew root word which appears in the Old Testament, and I'm trying to like make this parallel concordance within the Quran, because in most of the times the root words which appears in the Quran you can straight away point out to the some Tanahic term, which wouldn't be strange because well, Arabic and the Hebrew is both Semitic languages. So yeah, and you can see that my reconstruction, for example, of Abu Lahab surah. I dive deep into this root words in there in my reconstruction.
Yeah, good deal. And let's see. How did Dead Sea Scrolls impact Judaism, Islam, and Christianity?
Well, that's a
Um, I
question
don't
of
think
a million. Yeah.
I don't think they did. I think they were discovered much later. They were Old Testament text, right? And
Yeah, I
the great,
myself are very humble when it comes to the Dead Sea Scrolls because, well, I think the only person who can talk about the things is Robert Eisenman, as far as I know, because well, he studied this text. I never even touched them because well, you need to compare them first and foremost to the Masoretic text. That's the task. You need the manuscripts of that and compare to what we have today as the Orthodox Torah. But he like proposed some ideas like the parallels within Islam, but I don't remember in one of his articles. And yeah, but I'm not so sure because, well, in Dead Sea Scrolls there is no Nikodim, for example. It's diacritical marks, whilst in Masoretic texts they are present. And of course, in Semitic languages, if there is no diacritical, it's a big pain in the place to reconstruct what the people were meant, because no vowels basically. I mean, part of the text, of course, you can reconstruct because some word combination would inevitably point out to some specific word, but most of the times it just, yeah.
very good. All right. Excuse me. So yeah, if there's anybody more comments and questions, um, else, let's see. Maybe I'll give it a few more moments if we have any more questions. But yeah, thanks everybody for your questions and comments. And
Thanks.
yeah, good deal. Um, yeah, anything else that you wanted to
Yeah,
touch on?
I just wanted to present that there's several non-Muslim tradition about the fall of the angels, and yeah,
Yeah.
I myself
And
think
then,
it comes from the Syriac milieu, but
yeah. Well,
yeah.
there's the Drew's account where he failed to worship Adam, and that was a good thing
Mm.
because
Not the
Allah
Druze,
said,
but Yazidi, as far as I know.
okay, I'm probably off the
Uh,
Yazidis, yeah. And then for that, they're accused of devil worship.
yeah, because they held this idea that, well, they call him Malak Tawus, the angel, or well, it's a big question because again, in Semitic languages, this Malak can be, if we just straight away like remove the dead criticals, it could be Melek, which is the angel, like the messenger, or Malak, which is the king or archon. And I think that's exactly where the Gnostics took up this idea of archon. So you just read text differently. And they call him Malek Tawus, the angel the peacock angel,
Mhm.
that he was a good one because, well, he just followed the monotheism. He refused to worship the creation and worship the God instead. And
Yeah. And, along the same lines as parallelomania, there it's interesting how like we have the fall of Adam, like he eats the fruit, Adam and Eve, and then they're cast out. And so like mainstream Christianity, that's the fall, right?
Mhm.
And where like you you look upward, right? That you could see emanation, the original emanating from the monad as a type of fall, that the further away you get from the monad,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
more you start to fall because you're more away
you're,
from that, right? And just like Sophia, she created on her own, that's a fall in the Godhead, right?
yeah,
Um,
exactly.
and you know, she falls like the fruit there is just creating on her own or doing what was forbidden, right?
Mhm.
And that's how we get Yaldabaoth. And then he falls.
Yeah, it's
So
like a constant falling of this kind of
yeah,
beings.
and I mean the angels in heaven, right? Where I mean it doesn't really appear. I don't see it in Revelation, but there's that idea that a third of the angels of heaven fell and
Yeah,
followed Lucifer. Um, I don't know. It's a recurring theme: fall in heaven,
yeah. If it's
Adam
not like
falling.
a pagan in origin, to be honest.
What's that?
If it's not the pagan in origin, I think that's just more broadly some like the antediluvian stuff we are talking about. But yeah, the just depends whether you're monist or the dualist, I guess, because you can fall and still be part of divinity, but you can fall
Mhm.
into the abyss, into the realm of darkness, and it's more dualistic reading of that.
Yeah. Oh, here, maybe, okay, so maybe we're not going to go too quickly here. Starfish 19. I've not seen that name before, so thank you so much, Starfish 19. Uh, let's see. I think was I supposed to read the other one first?
There
Oh,
is.
yeah. Okay, yep. There's I've heard that Islam was a heresy against the Trinity. I've heard that too. Not actually Gnostic in origin. I'm sorry, I just joined 6 a.m. here.
You're not an only one.
Yeah,
Where
it's
it's gonna be something in the Middle East by that time frame. But Islam was a heresy against the Trinity. I heard this idea that maybe Islam just came up from this kind of Syrian anti-Trinitarian movements, but well, present some text of the Syriac anti-Trinitarians. It just some weird reports from the heresiologists that there was like Syriac anti-Trinitarians. Definitely, we can clearly see this anti-Trinitarian movement as in the Europe, for example, with the Arianism. But it's quite distant from Mesopotamia, and not actually Gnostic. Well, if you look into the 7th century Mesopotamia, it would be like basically the Gnostic Sea. There would be Manichaeans, Marcionites, Dysonites, like different this kind of Gnostic Jewish sects, Nazarenes, still present, by the way, and Orthodoxy, of course. But I think it would be minority in this Gnostic Sea, which were in Mesopotamia. Just later on, and today Christians want to present it almost like was majority, and historians, of course, who are not necessarily anti-Trinitarian; they were just anti-Theotokos, what is called the idea that the Mary was the mother of God. That would be blasphemous for them. But you can drive many parallels. But I myself very skeptical about this anti-Trinitarianism, because you can read this Kul Hu Aloha, because what is the argument most of the times, that the Surah Ikhlas in the Quran, Kul Hu Aloha Hat Allahu Samad Lam Yalid wa Lam Yulad, that the higher God wasn't born and is not begotten, basically, and do not beget. But I myself see as the picture of the demiurge, for example.
Mhm.
He is not born because he's abortion in the Valentinian or overall Gnostic tradition. He does not beget, and we have this type of critique within Manichaean texts where they would be highly critical to ascribe the sonship to the demiurge, to the Yahweh or Adonai. They would call the Christians who would say that Jesus is the son of Adonai heretics, and that's why the God doesn't beget. Like he's not the real father.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. I've not thought of it that way. And then here, continuing on, that Islam started, or actually was, Christian heresy against the Trinity, and hence the name Muhammad, or on Dome of the Rock,
Yeah.
meaning the praiseworthy one, was actually referring to Jesus. Yeah, I've heard of that.
And first and foremost, we, as far as I know, don't have any like evidence that Dome of the Rock from the 7th century. Like archaeologically and scripturally, there's no evidence for that. As far as I know, it just only appears in chronicles like in the 9th century. But you can clearly see it in the coinage, in this kind of Moavia coin tradition, where he would just take away the Christian coin and would strip away them from strip away the crosses on them, or instead of the crosses uses the poles, and nobody knows what the hell this poles means. Like maybe there's some, I don't know, because I myself, this is one of the mysteries for me, why on earth on early Muslim coinage appears this kind of a spear within the ark. What the hell does it mean? Nobody can give the clear answer. They would just say, oh, that's just the weapon of the Muhammad. Like, come on, it comes from the Abbasids, the 3 ports. How can you trust them? And yeah, but you can see at least this kind of Eastern Islam as a part of anti-Trinitarian, not Eastern, Western Islam, which would be basically descendants of the Ghassanid, like Ghassanid Roman vassal state. Maybe there was some beef between this Arabic kings and the Romans. But yeah, it's a very speculative to begin with. That you can read, of course, this kind of Muhammad in the Dome of the Rock, referring to Jesus, and overall even Dome of the Rock bears some parallels with the Christian, not the churches, but this kind of veneration sites where there would be placed some reliquia in the center, and the whole building would be this kind of circle around this reliquia. In case of Dome of the Rock, it's the rock of the Abraham. But I'm skeptical, very skeptical.
Yeah. And along those lines, Starfish 19 goes on to say that there's some scholars that say originally the Dome of the Rock was built by Christians. I've not heard that. Yeah.
Maybe Moavia was a Christian, and hence there's such a big. He was like almost the second Satan in the Abbasid tradition. It's like the arch heretic in the Hadith. Like nobody loves him. But I heard that many, at least from one article I read, that many Umayyad caliphs, and Muawiyah was the first Umayyad caliph, were Manichaeans, by the way. So that they would be declared zindiks in the overall Abbasid tradition, and it's quite clear what it means. And in the Muslim tradition means the Manichaeans. So,
Mhm.
but it's maybe later on I would, because well, it's just a big study. You need to study all these inscriptions and stuff.
And here we have in Islam, what happens after death is teaching similar to Judaism and Christianity, resurrection, soul, heaven, hell. Yeah. So pretty much everybody goes to hell. And but if you're a Hanbali school pious Muslim that prays all the time, you do the 5 prayers plus the bonus prayers.
Yeah,
Then you go to Jannah, which is like the Garden of Eden.
and
And
if you missed one prayer and haven't repented, you will boil in hell like a
oh
dog.
yeah, yeah. But temporarily, eventually you'll make it to Jannah. But
Yeah.
yeah, for every prayer that you miss, you do a little bit of cooking. But then eventually you go up. So I mean, so everybody goes to hell, but well, unless you were a shaheed, and then you go
Yeah.
directly to Jannah. But they don't really have many of those anymore. So
But in Hanbalism, like many Hanbalis were very fan of apokatastasis. For example, Ibn Taymiyyah himself is, Ibn Taymiyyah, almost the idol of the Salafiyya. He believed in apokatastasis, that everybody, even the kuffar, even the non-believers, would eventually enter the paradise. But from what I do believe, that in Islam it's exactly the Zoroastrian tradition about the heaven and hell. There's this kind
oh
of
yeah,
tripartite distinction that even represented in the Surah Al-Fatiha, which Muslims pray every day. Like, how's it? Ni'mat alayhim, غير مغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. There's 3 types of people. Ni'mat alayhim, who are dependent on ni'ma, which is the grace. مغضوب عليهم, who are like wiggly when they bypass this Chinvad bridge, which undoubtedly presented in the Quranic narratives as Sirat bridge. They were like passing this. They will pass the bridge, but it will be with obstacles on it. And Walad Dolin, and Dolin, it's straight away the fallen ones, who will fall from the bridge. And the first will enter the paradise, the first type of people, Ni'mat Aleihim. It's like pneumatics of the Paul epistles. Maghdubi Aleihim would go to the reincarnation process, which is the psychics. And Walad Dolin is the one who will go to hell without even the reprobable state in the animals or plants. But there are some verses in the Quran which indicates that, for example, that Allah transformed Jews into swines and pigs, or some opponents of Noah, which became like this kind of the leaves, like the leaves of the tree or something. So
yeah,
and the Nusayri tradition believe in that, by the way. So I'm not the first to propose.
yeah. And Allah knows best. Uh,
Allahu alam. Yeah.
yeah. And let's see here. All right. So a lot of comments on. Holy smokes, these things keep going. Um, yeah, so maybe we'll end there because we can't touch on all of these. But
Yeah.
let's see.
We will never leave this stream.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, all right. Yeah, but yeah, that's where it's at. So yeah, interesting idea, the whole tradition of the fall and Islam and how it differs from Christianity. It's a little bit like
Yeah,
well,
maybe
I mean,
next time we will discuss this question of the reincarnation within Islam and the groups who defended reincarnation.
yeah,
Which
I've not heard anything about that. I didn't know that there was reincarnation within, I guess,
yeah,
or at least mainstream Islam.
no,
That
not in mainstream, but in some of the Shia traditions, they believe
yeah.
that.
So yeah, you have to check us out next time talking about
Yeah,
reincarnation in Islam.
yeah.
And just as like to set it up, when I was interviewing the Alawite, he
Mhm.
was talking about he doesn't like the term reincarnation because it sounds so
Yeah,
too far.
it's very like profane understanding, like, oh, there's like some sort of the
Yeah, I
substance
think
within you who travels, like that's most of the belief.
yeah,
Most of
like
the people think.
resurrection or something like that, where they used to be the Alawi belief that like it's Plato, Socrates, and somebody, like there'd be triads, and like
Mm.
there's Jesus, Paul, and Peter, let's say, form a triad, and they keep on reoccurring, and then it's Muhammad, Ali, and
Salman.
yeah, and they
In
keep
some,
on.
yeah, in some tradition, even this, we are very skeptical about the Peter because many people translate the Arabic, which appears like Shamun, As-Safa, as the Peter, like who, like it's just Christian understanding. If you translate it like straight away, it would be Simon Cephas. And
Oh, well,
and
isn't that he? That's Peter,
well,
right?
that's the big question, I would say. Like it could be
Like,
Simon Magus
well, Simon
easily.
Campus means. Well, that's kind of like what I alluded to previously is the rock and the fish in terms of astrology.
Yeah,
Like Peter Cephas, that means well, no, Simon Cephas, right? It's the same name, right?
I
Um,
am on the same boat with Dr. Price on that because, well, it just the attempt of the Christians to like back up the idea that Paul was a Simon. Is basically it. When the Peter is identified with this Simon Cephas, and there is no evidence that it was the same persons. So,
Interesting. Yeah. But all that and more
yeah,
in
in
the
the
next
next
installment. Yep.
next time.
All right, brilliant. Thank you everybody for watching, and thank you everybody for watching until the end. Go here to Gnostic Quran. Go like and subscribe to all, or well, subscribe
Or
and then like all
first,
his videos. And then if you have time, come back and like and subscribe over here at Brave New History. But yeah, thank you so much, everybody. Have an awesome whatever time it is where you're
day or night, have a
at.
good everything.
Absolutely. All right. Bye bye.